spot. Pat McElwee, you are in the right spot. Hi, Anita. Susan H., it's 7 p.m. here, so perfect timing for me. Wow, this is so exciting. This is very cool. Okay, so let's give this a few more minutes and ask me anything while we're sitting here waiting. And obviously, you guys should know this. I'm in Arizona, and I know a few people had an issue with the time zone. Oh, excuse me, and I'm getting over a cold. But anyhow, back to the time zone issue. It's so funny. Arizona and Hawaii are the two states that do not follow daylight savings time in the U.S., except for the Navajo Reservation, which does follow daylight savings time. And then the Hopi Reservation is this little tiny spot right in this giant Navajo Nation reservation. And they don't follow daylight savings. So heading up to the northeast part of our state and going to the town of Page, it's it's hilarious. You just really never have any idea what time it is. So, yeah, it's just kind of weird. What is my favorite thing to paint? Charlie May. Flowers. I love painting flowers. It's so funny. Every day we walk around in life, and if you happen to live in a really green area around the world, you might pass hundreds of flowers a day. And I don't think very many people get up close and look. And even when I was a kid, I was always the type of person to get down on the ground and look at all the veins in the petals. And I think flowers are amazing. I love them. So my second favorite thing is still lifes, but flowers are they're my favorite. Love the painting at your back. Let's see. Wait, do I turn this way? Yes, that was the one I just finished a few months ago. I actually did that for a workshop I taught in La Quinta, California. And of course, then COVID hit and everything kind of went downhill. And so I just felt really funny about it. So I put it away for a while and then I just got it out and finished it. And I'm glad I did. I think it turned out really nice. So, good. It looks like everybody's finding it. This is so exciting. We've got I hope I pronounce this right. Corn Lerm from Ontario. Hello. Hi, everybody. Even though it's getting close to 11 Arizona time, I still want to give people a few more minutes to find this, so we don't leave anybody behind. I don't want anyone to feel stressed. We all should keep in mind, and I'm the worst for this. Take a deep breath and say, this is supposed to be fun. We're just going to learn something fun. It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be the Sistine Chapel. And if I have to stay an extra hour, I'm going to stay as long as it takes today so that everybody really gets a good feel of what I am trying to teach you. It's not about the teacup and the lace and that background. It's about learning how to paint with a limited palette and building skills so that you can paint whatever you want. So, yeah. Okay. Oh my gosh! I hope I say this right. Sewing Leoness from Poland. Wow, that is just absolutely amazing. Glad to see you. Glad to see you joining. Don't have the drawing. Okay, I'm going to post that link again. So here you go. If you go to that link, I'm probably just really messing your name up. Selaya Alanki. I posted you the link. Go there, open up that course, and then you're going to see a section that says downloads, and that section is going to show the drawing. And don't worry if you don't have the drawing ready. you could always just watch, follow along, and then this live stream is going to be, YouTube will convert it, and then you can watch that later on if you want. And then that way that will get you ready for tomorrow. Hi, Debbie, May from New Zealand. It's 6 a.m. on a Sunday here. Oh my goodness. Okay, my goodness. That really makes me feel good. You are up at 6 in the morning just to watch this live stream. Wow, that's awesome. And Shannon, yes, it's all about the skills, which is how I've been able to work on the peaches I posted on the Facebook group. That actually looked beautiful, and I obviously repeat myself a lot in this, but getting a fresh palette every day, putting it on a round plate like how I have, and limiting your colors to either 3, maybe 5, you would be absolutely surprised how quickly your painting skills they develop. You don't gain anything from having this very large palette with 30 colors. It's very difficult to create any sort of harmony in your painting. And I will say this a lot: most well-known artists paint with a very limited palette. Usually 5, 6 colors even, which is called a split primary palette, which doesn't really matter to us right now, but I'm just pointing that out, that it's the KISS method. Keep it simple, stupid. Oh, good, Tanya, and you found the drawing. Okay, and again, please keep in mind that you could actually work on drawing it out. You could catch up. You can watch this live stream later when it converts over, and you'll be able to see all the questions and comments, and maybe even work on it in the evening. And I'll be around to answer questions. And again, at the end of this live stream, and I'll say this a few times, I set up a discuss chat on the very, if you look on all the chapters, at the very end, you're going to see that discuss chapter. Click on that. That way you can post your paintings, and if you want to do it that way, it's a little bit easier than through YouTube, and that way the whole world isn't seeing your painting if you don't want to do that. So, Pat, yeah, I am on. Great. So wonderful. Again, hopefully everybody's going to find this. Let's maybe give it another 5 minutes or so. And so I just want to say one more thing. I'm getting over a cold, and it was really bad all week, and I know a few of you know that. So I may have to blow my nose, but what I'll do is I'll step outside of my little studio here and blow my nose and then come back in, which I might add, I am actually going to do that right now because I'm starting to feel a little stuffy, so just excuse me for a moment. Okay, I'm back. Oh, nobody wants to hear that. Okay. Oh, Pat, I'm so glad to see you here. So I want to say this again. There go. If you can hear that, there goes our little chihuahuas. We have 2 of them. And I've tried to close the windows. My husband is out in the living room trying to keep them quiet, so hopefully we won't hear that too much. So, excuse me. So I lost, I totally lost my train of thought. So I just want, again, to remind everybody, I'm going to go slow. We're going to do this step by step. We're going to take breaks where we can talk and chat if you have questions and enable everybody to catch up. Just like if you were at an actual workshop. So yeah, it'll be totally okay. You don't have to feel like you're going to get left behind. And I also want to say this. So whenever I'm starting a painting, and especially this one, and I've thought about it over the last couple of weeks, sometimes I don't know exactly how I'm going to start until I get painting. Most of the time when I paint, I start with yellow. I'll spend, a few hours just getting down and kind of building some values with yellows, and we'll discuss that in a little bit. And then I might go to adding in some shadows and building values. But honestly, on this one, I think I am going to go ahead and start with adding shadows. And you'll see that in a few minutes when we get started. Oh, look! Other people are showing up. Yay! Hi, Debbie from India. Smitha Ravi. Smitha. I'm not really sure. Hopefully I got that right. So happy that you're joining us. This is exciting. So good. Okay. So it's 11:05 and hopefully other people are finding this. And I think I'm going to go ahead and show you a few things before we get started. And by the way, I'm going to show you the image on my screen enlarged. That way you can see that we're only going to do, or at least I'm only going to do, a couple of very tiny spots of masking fluid. We're going to leave that alone. It's going to be inside of the teacup, and then I'm going to go ahead and work on those shadows outside of the teacup. That way it'll give that masking fluid a few minutes to dry. So don't worry that we're not going to have enough time to do everything. I'm going to stay on as long as we need to today so we can get the things done that I really wanted to concentrate on. Okay. Hi, Nancy from Ottawa. Oh, lovely. Somebody else. Okay. I'm so glad everybody's finding it. Woohoo. This is good. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pull my screens down a little bit, and I am going to show you the painting and where I'm going to put in some highlights, or I'm sorry, put in some masking fluid, and then we're going to talk about what to expect and a few other things. The palette, the color wheel I've made. And then I'm going to show you how we're going to mix those colors from those three colors right on that color wheel. So we're not going to just start throwing water on the painting just yet. So let's see. Let me go ahead and show you my computer screen now, and let me get some things out of the way. And so, yep, good. I want to show you this image here. Okay, so hopefully you can all see this. And you can see just some tiny highlights where I'm pointing out, and a couple around these bubbles. And then there's one there and a little one there. That is really the areas that I was mostly concerned about. And you do not have to mask anything off if you want. I am actually going to be going over how you can scrub out highlights and how to save areas where you feel that you have lost your whites. Trust me, I do it a lot, and that's why my scrubber brushes are my favorite. So anyhow, it's just going to be these little tiny areas that you can see right there. Those will be the areas that we will be highlighting. Oh, or I'm sorry, masking again. Okay, let me go back. And now what I'm going to do is I am going to show you the teacup comparison. This is, I'm showing you here, what I did was I took that teacup and I actually converted it to black and white. This is a good thing to do when you're painting with your own images so that you can see how dark some areas are, where your lightest lights are, and where your darkest values are. And if we look at that black and white image, you can see that underneath the lace there are a couple of really, really dark spots, and that is from that fabric, that lemon and stripes. And you can see that inside of the teacup, it is very, very dark. and a few of those spots obviously along the stripes in the back. So this will give you a good idea of where we are going to be building up those darkest values. And the interesting thing is if you look at the teacup and that beautiful little saucer, you're going to see that those shadows aren't really all that dark. And that's kind of why I decided that I'm going to put those in first. And then we'll start putting in those beautiful little flowers right on top of it. So, okay, so I've shown you that. I'm going to go now to my image, face down. And so it's all drawn out, and it is ready to go. And you can probably see right there that I've actually got another webcam showing my palette and my colors, which I'm gonna just wet here a little bit and soften them up. I actually put those colors on this morning. So let's quickly talk about your palette. Hopefully you all are starting with nice, fresh, clean colors. That's how we're going to build some beautiful glows and just nice shadows in that saucer and inside where that tea is going to go. So again, make sure you have fresh, clean colors. And if you haven't watched any of my free tutorials on starting with a limited palette, it makes all the difference. You can see that this is very round, and I've got my yellow up at the top, my magenta on the side, and my my blue over on the side there. So that's important. So I've got my Nickel Azo yellow, my PY150, that's the pigment ID number. My image size, Karen is asking, is 9x12, and you can size that up or shrink it down to however you want. Okay, so we've got the PY150 Nickel Azo yellow, which is a very transparent, very staining, beautiful golden yellow. And my blue is Phthalo Blue, green shade, PB15. My quinacridone magenta is the PR122. Those are the pigment identification numbers. And that's important because when you are painting with transparent colors and you are layering colors one on top of the other, it is so important that you don't use opaque colors. If you do, the pigment particles are very large. They aren't going to sink into the paper, and they're going to lift and they're going to muddy. So that's why I use these three colors. They work very well together. They're all transparent, they're all staining, and they're going to stay where we put them. Okay, so now that we've got that, you can see my palette, and up in the corner, obviously you can see that I've got the image small. I really suggest that you don't try to paint from that. I'm just using that image so that you can just get a general idea of where I'm at in the painting. I am hoping that you're taking that image and putting it on your either computer screen, or you've printed it out, or you've maybe got it sitting on your iPad on a stand so that you can see it well. Okay, so let's see what other questions we've got. Is your masking fluid bad if it smells a bit of ammonia? I meant to test and I totally forgot. Actually, it's just the opposite. If it smells very strongly of ammonia, your masking fluid is very good. Masking fluid is latex, and that latex, and I'll pull that over because that's where we're going to be starting. That latex is suspended in ammonia. And so it's just these little globs of latex. And so then what happens is when you paint that masking fluid on your paper, that ammonia evaporates, and all those pieces of latex, they all knit together, and that's how they form that rubberized surface that stops the water and the color from sinking under that place that you have masked off. So thank you for that question. You definitely want to smell that masking fluid. If it no longer smells of ammonia, you're going to have to throw it out, and you're going to have to buy some new masking fluid. Okay, excuse me. Okay, so what I want to do right now is I want to go ahead and mask out those little highlights that I have pointed out. And then after I do that, then I'm going to show you a few more things, and we're going to let that dry. And I'm going to show you the color wheel recipe card that I've made, and I'm going to show you how we're going to get those colors. Okay, so I have a couple of paper towels folded here, and I'm going to show you a few things with masking. So I've got my masking fluid, and I have this little tiny bar of soap from a hotel. And if you're doing a lot of masking, this is great to use to stop all the masking fluid from building up in your brush. What you do is, so you wet your brush and then you rub it in the soap, and then you dip it into your masking fluid. But I am not going to do that. I'm not going to worry about it because it's such a small area that I'm painting. I actually have a separate container of water here that I'm going to use to rinse my brush out of my masking fluid. I do not want to use my water containers that I have sitting next to me, because then you're going to get latex in my water container. So, okay, so I don't want to do that. Let's see, somebody's asking a question. Why is your pencil picture so dark? Are you asking on the screen, the live stream, or are you looking at the image that you are downloading? Because, oh, okay, so now I see Shannon, probably so we were able to see it. Yes, if you're asking about this, absolutely. Normally, I do not paint with lines that dark, but there are limitations when you film. I have to have a lot of lights that are shining down, and if these lines are too light, you can't see them. So yes, that's why. But as I paint an area, and thank you for bringing that up, that helps. So we'll get back to masking in a second. I'm going to show you my Kneaded Eraser, and it's very soft and pliable. And what I do right before I start painting on an area, I kind of roll it into a log shape, and then I take it and I put it on the area I'm going to paint, and I gently roll across it, and you're going to see that. So I'll just show you right there. Can you see how much lighter that area is now? And that's a little bit harder for you to see, so I wanted to make sure it was nice and dark for you. Okay, so I'm going to put this off to the side again, and I'm going to grab a very, very tiny brush. This is a double aught brush. And normally, if I were to be painting, or if I were to be putting down a lot of masking fluid, I would take some of this masking fluid and I would put it in a separate container. And I should probably go ahead and do that now so you can see me doing that. That way I don't dry out the whole bottle of masking fluid. So let me go ahead and grab a tiny container. Okay, I have a very small container here. And I'm going to go, oh, let me talk about this too before I pour this out. At the bottom of a lot of masking fluids is a little bit of color. That way, as your masking fluid dries, you can see where you've placed it. Honestly, I don't see that as a problem normally because your light shines on the masking fluid a little bit different. But anyhow, gently roll it around. Do not shake your masking fluid. If you shake your masking fluid, you're going to build up all these bubbles in there. And then you're going to dip your brush in and you're going to put it down. And as that masking fluid dries, that bubble will pop and it will leave a tiny pinhole in there that's very, very difficult to see. So don't shake your masking fluid. Okay, so I'm just going to pour a little tiny bit in there. Okay, and then I'm going to get an extra paper towel, and I try to keep the rim of my masking fluid clean because it is a bear to try to get unstuck. If you get any on the rim, then it dries and it's hard to get off. Okay, so I have a little bit of masking fluid, and I have this really small brush. Oh. I'm just hitting those little tiny bits of highlights. Let's see, and then as this masking fluid dries, it's going to get kind of a translucent look. Oh, good now. Okay, right there. And it's going to have kind of a little bit of a yellow tint to it. And honestly, that I think is about all I want to mask off. Maybe, oh, you know what? Let's do just a couple little dots right along there. Okay, little tip when you're masking. If you are having a hard time with a tiny brush, let me grab a stylus that I use, if I can find it. Oh, found it. Okay. Let me show you this. So this is a stylus that people use for embossing paper. It has a little ball tip there and a really tiny one there. So you can actually take and dip it in your masking fluid, and it will just make a little itty bitty tiny dot wherever you want. This is also great for, let's say you're doing a flower and you have a lot of those little stamens, then you can kind of mask those out. You can just take it, just drop a little dot right on there, and it will give you a perfect circle. It also is great if you don't want to try to have to use the soap. And then you can actually use anything with masking fluid. Here's another, let me show you another tool that I use. This is for oil painting, and you can see the ends are very rubbery. So you can actually dip it into your masking fluid and then apply the masking fluid. And then as it starts to dry, you just pull it off and throw it away. So, okay, I'm going to go ahead and let those dry. I'm going to let those little areas dry. If you have leftover masking fluid and you have a little container like this, just let it dry and then peel it off. That's actually kind of fun. Okay, so I'm going to put this off to the side, and I think I got every area that I want masked off. So I found a little spot down there that I decided to do, but honestly, that's up to you. Again, later on, we are going to be going over pulling up highlights. Even though I say that we're using staining colors, they actually can be scrubbed out, and scrubbing is actually a big part of my painting if you've seen any of my paintings. Okay, so we're going to let that dry. I'm moving all of my masking stuff out of the way, except I'm going to point out one more thing. This is a rubber pickup tool. It's kind of like a crepe rubber, and you can see I have had this thing for years. So what you do when we get our masking fluid dry, you can take this and you just kind of pick up the edge of your masking fluid, and it will pull it all right up. So you can use your finger, but please make sure that your fingers are clean and don't have any oils on the surface so you don't leave any smudges on your painting. All right, so I'm putting that away. Again, I'm going to let this dry, and it looks like we can see it pretty well. Okay, so I'm going to let that dry, and now let's start with I'm gonna move this out of the way for a minute. And now I'm going to show you my color wheel that I made. And I get this all the time. Why is it so important to do a color wheel? The reason it's so important to do a color wheel is because when, oh, whoops, we'll leave that there. When you are working with 3 colors and you're first learning to paint, and I think I said this earlier, having 10 different yellows in front of you, 10 different blues, 10 different reds, greens, Payne's gray, blacks, it's just nothing but confusion, especially when you're learning to paint. And I've been painting for years now. Obviously, a lot of you have looked at my paintings, and I still stick with this limited palette. Every once in a while, I may add, say, a warmer blue, like an ultramarine blue, but I'll still never go above 5 colors that I paint with. And most of the time, I stick with 3. Here's a couple things it does for you. The fewer things that you have to think about while you're painting, the better. Having to think about which one of the 10 yellows you use, how is it going to harmonize with something else in a painting? It's just unnecessary. And the colors that you work with and you paint with, you get to start knowing how they interact with each other. It is very, very difficult to understand all the properties of a color and how it reacts with every other color. It just makes painting a little bit more confusing that way. When you start understanding and really knowing your yellow and your red and your blue, then you know what to expect when you add a drop of yellow, say, into a background. I know that my Nicolazzo yellow, if I add it into a dark background that I'm painting, I know it's going to push the cyan, my blue here, it's going to push the magenta away. So that's really important. Actually, that's a phthalo blue. I said cyan, and that's something else I want to point out about this color wheel that I'm using. These colors, this is basically, it's a cyan type of a color, the yellow and the magenta. This is called a printer's primary. And when images are being printed, like for a magazine, the reason why that they use this magenta instead of, say, that more of a red, like more of a Coca-Cola red, or more of what you would think would be like the ultramarine blue, is because they figured out a long time ago that these colors are the best at making all the other colors. So this is called a printer's primary. It's actually one of my favorite primaries to paint with. It makes really beautiful reds and oranges, and it makes gorgeous greens and very deep and dusky purples. Okay, so here we go. If we look back again at that image, and hopefully you have it up on your screen, I am going to try to recreate some of these colors. Give me a sec here, I'm just kind of arranging my screens. Okay, so I want to try to get that brown that you saw in the teacup. So what I am going to do is I'm going to take a little bit of yellow and I'm going to put it in the center there. I'm going to clean my brush. And I grabbed that magenta and I'm making a very powerful orange. And another thing I want to point out is all of your screens obviously are going to be calibrated a little bit differently. So trust me when I say that's an orange. So you know what I'm going to do now? This is how I'm going to build value. I am going to add a little bit, actually a lot, of that phthalo blue in there. And I know it doesn't look like much right now, so I'm going to keep adjusting this. I'm going to add more yellow. And I'm going to add a lot more red. And pretty soon I'm going to start developing a brown. And really all brown is, I mean, this is simplifying it a little bit, but really it's just a super, super dark value of, say, orange. And depending on, let me see if I can simplify this a little bit. Sometimes it's really hard to think, talk, paint, and teach all at the same time. Okay, let me just show you instead of telling you. So now I'm going to take some of that color. I'm going to put it right here. And look at that. Now I'm going to add some water to that. And you can see how I have made a brown just from that, the yellow, the magenta, and the blue. So again, now as I'm looking at that color, I can say to myself, you know, I think I want that brown to be a little bit more on the yellow side. So I picked up some yellow. I'm going to pick up some more. Going to mix it in there. And can you see how a little bit of that yellow is coming out now? So I have changed that brown just a little bit just by adding one of those primary colors. So now let's see what happens if I add a little bit of that magenta. And look at that. Now I've changed that brown and it's kind of biased a little bit more towards that, the red. Now let's see what happens if I add a lot more blue. And look at that. Look at how dark I now have that brown. So now I'm just going to kind of move it around. And there you go. We have our browns from those three transparent staining colors. And then we can lighten it as much as we want. Or again, I can add that third primary color right there and get those deep dark colors. In fact, I can even take that dark value and I can drop in a little bit more of that red and change it just a bit. Now I have a really, really dark valued brown that kind of leans towards the red side. And I don't want to be flip about this and say, and that's all there is to it. But honestly, once you start painting like this, it is going to change how you see everything. Do you notice I don't have to stop and go, I wonder what kind of yellow would work to get the yellow in those lemons on that fabric. I should go and grab a burnt sienna and maybe add some black to it to get the inside of that teacup looking really dark. I'm only focusing and concentrating on those three colors. Okay, so now let's see something else that we're going to need to address in this painting. Well, there's some leaves on that fabric in the background. Okay, so I'm going to take some yellow. And this time I'm just going to go ahead and put it on the paper with a little bit of water because I'm actually going to have to clean that palette. I don't want too many different colors going on. I just want you to see what we are able to achieve and how we are going to get those colors that we're painting with. Okay, so now I've got some yellow on there. Well, let's add some of that beautiful phthalo blue. And look at that. Creating a beautiful green. What happens when I add more? Well, again, I'm making more of a blue-green. What happens if I add more yellow? Look at that. So now we have our leaf green. Now, if I look at one of those leaves, I can see that there's a little bit of a dark area in part of the leaf. It was obviously, it's a painting of a leaf on fabric. So how am I going to get that? Okay, well, we already know that when we mix these three colors together, we can create these beautiful dark values. So I have mixed the yellow and the blue, and I've got these gorgeous greens. So how am I going to dull that down a little bit and build some of the dark? Same way I did over here. I'm going to add just a touch of yellow. So I'm going to get my very tiny brush. Now I'm going to pick up a little bit more of the blue. And there you go. So now I've created a dark value, and now these colors are harmonious and they all are related to each other. Instead of going for a tube green or looking at a chart where you've maybe sat at home and spent an afternoon mixing up 30 different greens from all your paints, you're not worrying about that. You're just saying, I'm going to take these two colors and I'm going to make a green. And hey, I need to get some of that green dark. Okay, I'm going to go add that third primary. Now I have a little bit of a dark area. So now we've mixed some of the greens that we're going to see in that painting. Let's see. Now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to address some of the shadows that we're seeing in that cup. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to clean off this palette area. I want to have nice, clean colors. Okay, is it still centered? All right, there we go. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take clean water. I'm going to take a little bit of the yellow. This is exactly the same thing that we did when I was mixing those browns. I'm going to take some yellow, and instead of taking the red first, because I want these shadows to be a little bit on the cooler side that you can see up there in the teacup. It's got some yellow, and I'm grabbing some magenta, or I'm sorry, some of the phthalo blue. Let's add a little bit more yellow there. Let's add a little bit more blue. Okay, now I'm going to add a touch of that red. I don't always get this right away. Sometimes it takes a while to mix any amount of grays. Sometimes it takes just playing around with it till you find exactly what you want. Okay, I need to dull that down a little bit more. So I've added a little bit of that red. Add a little bit more. I think I need more blue. And I think I need some more yellow. Okay, let's see what this color looks like. I need more blue. I just added in more red. There we go. That just took a little bit. I added just a touch of that red in there. And I just want to add that this is a new thing that I figured out how to do. Was I have a separate webcam just focused strictly on my palette, because I really think it's important that you see how I am mixing these colors. And even though it takes up a little bit of the real estate space on the filming, I still think it's good to be able to see that. Okay. So now you can see I've kind of made a basic gray. Still think I need a little bit more red. There we go. Now it's a little bit more neutral. There we go. I'm happy with that. So now let's say I am seeing some reflections. It doesn't even matter that it's this particular painting. Let's say you're painting a still life and maybe a yellow color is reflecting into the shadows. Well, this is what's really great. You just pick a little bit of your yellow up and bias that shadow a little bit more on the yellow side or a little bit more on the blue side. And you just have to keep playing around with it till you finally get it however you want it. And this is the other thing that's great about painting with this limited palette, is that you don't ever have to worry that you keep mixing and mixing and mixing, you're going to muddy those colors. It's not going to happen. They're going to stay beautiful and vibrant, and as they dry and then you add other layers, you're going to see these gorgeous grays come through. And this is why I am a real stickler about not painting with Payne's gray or black. You're never going to get these beautiful just changes in color, and Payne's gray really has no relation to these colors. So by mixing all these three and making your beautiful grays, you're creating harmony in your painting. Okay, so let me go to a smaller brush. No, I'm gonna stick with that brush. Let's go ahead and mix that really beautiful color that we see in those flowers. It's like a dull red, so how am I going to do that? Okay. Again, let's get rid. I might want to add too. Normally, I normally don't paint with this small of a palette, but I want you to be able to see how I'm mixing colors, so I'm going to be cleaning it a lot. Any bigger and it would take up space on the actual tutorial when we get to that. Okay, so now I need to mix the red on that flower. So how am I going to do it? Okay, let's throw some red in there. And let's throw a little bit of that yellow. So now I'm kind of mixing like almost like a red, a Coca-Cola red. So that, I'm looking at that color and it's obviously nowhere near that beautiful dull red color. So how am I going to get that? Well, again, I'm going to come over here to my red or my blue. I'm going to drop it in, and it's obvious I dropped in too much because now it's dulled it down too much. So let me grab some more red. And I'm just going to keep playing with it till I get it where I want it. But it's now a little bit too bright, so this time I'm going to be a little bit more careful. And wait, I don't want these colors to blend together, so let me stop here. Okay, there we go. Okay, so I'm just going to grab a little bit of that blue. And it's still not quite there. It's still pretty cool. I need to warm it up a little bit. So what do I need to do? I need to go grab some of that yellow. There we go. It's happening. That is getting pretty darn close. So now I'm going to try just a little bit more of that blue. I went too far. So I'm going to grab some more of that red, mix it in there, and now go back and grab some of that yellow again. And look at that. I'd say we're pretty close to that color of those flowers. And so now I'm going to make just a little line, and I'm going to see how I did. I think I'm pretty darn close, but you know what I think? I need to go back and add just a little bit more red. Now put it next to it and look at that. There we go. I think I've got it. I might even have to go a little bit more of that red. Now I've created the color that I see in the teacup flowers. So for me, I feel like we've got the most important part of this. Now we need to build a very, very dark value for those black stripes. So what are we going to do? I'm going to go back to the same thing again. And this is why it is so important to use fresh colors. In fact, I'm probably going to have to squeeze some out here. Wait, let me scoot that over a little bit. Okay. When you use fresh colors, you're getting the full saturation value of those colors instead of having to keep watering them down. So do you see how I just scooped up quite a bit of that blue and a lot of that yellow? and that red. And now I'm back towards more of a brown color. So let's get some more of that blue in there. And look at that. Okay, now I'm going to pull that. And look at how dark that got that. Again, you've got to use fresh colors to get a really dark value going. And if you notice, I call it a dark value instead of black. I don't really think there are things that are actually black. It's just a combination of everything around it. All the shadows that you see, the reflections of all the colors, and that's what makes a really dark value. So there we go. I've got my black, I've got my browns, I have some beautiful shadow colors, I've got the greens on the leaf. I'm gonna go ahead and get started instead of worrying about those little lemons. We can already see that we can create some really beautiful yellow colors there. So I'm gonna put this to the side now, and I am going to go and look at the questions. See if anybody has any questions. Okay, let's see. Let me go back a little bit. Let's see. Tanya, I have Phthalocyanine green by M. Graham. However, it is not PB 15.3. It reads PG7. Yep. So that's because you're looking at phthalo green instead of phthalo blue. Phthalo green is also a lovely color to use if you wanted to drop in another color, but it's fine if you're a little bit more advanced. Feel free to do that. I'm not going to introduce a green. I just want to keep it with my 3 colors. Let's see. And then Shannon talks about using your glass pen. Yes, that works very well for masking things off. Okay, really appreciate the 3 scenes. Oh, good. I'm glad everybody can see that clearly. Thank you. Let's see. Wordplay asks, would you make a pool of these colors before you start painting or mix them as you need them? You know, it's kind of just depends on how I'm painting. Normally, when I start a new painting, and I'm going to move this out of the way for now. Normally, when I start a new painting, I start with just one color. I will mix in, or I will fill in just the yellows. Then I'll go ahead and start mixing colors, and just like I was doing on this little example, and then start adding, layer after layer. And you're going to see that as I paint. But for now, even though I'm getting rid of this beautiful, beautiful dark value black, I'm going to clean this all off. This is the other reason why I like using a little round palette. Well, again, usually we'll use a big Corelle plate. They're big dinner plates. They're super cheap, and I can have a bunch of them going at once if I want. Okay, so hopefully everybody understood how I'm mixing these colors. And let's see, let's move that. Give me just a second here. Let me move the yellow back up. Okay. All right, so now we're going to go ahead and start in this little area, right on this lower cup area, and I'm going to mix some grays, and we're going to use that as the first part, or paint that as for the first part of the painting. Let me talk a little bit before we get started on that about value. Value, or you can call it contrast if you want, is the most important part of painting anything. There's a saying that value is the workhorse, but color gets all the glory. And I can't tell you how true that is. You may not be good with composition. You may not even be great starting out learning how to mix colors. But if you learn value, you are about 2/3 of the way through to creating a really beautiful painting. So if you look at this, let me turn it this way. This is value. So here I've got something light valued all the way to a dark value. Look at the difference that as the values get darker and darker, what happens is it surrounds a white area. Look at how bright that white light. I haven't even done anything to it. There's no color in there. It's just the white of the paper. So value helps create it makes your painting really glow. It's so important to have really light lights and really dark light, or really dark darks. If you have that, again, you're 2/3 of the way to creating a painting that people just pass by, or people that actually just stop and go, wow, for some reason that painting just really pops. That's one of the reasons. That's what value is. Something else that's important to do, and I did this years and years ago, is I made myself a value scale, all the way from the darkest dark I could make to completely white and to everything in between. That way, when you're first learning value, it's just really wonderful for getting an idea of how dark a color should be. And again, I think that's where a lot of people struggle. There's a big difference between value, which is the lightness and darkness of a color, and saturation, which is the brightness or dullness of a color. And I'll pull my color wheel back, and that's exactly what I was explaining here. I took a very bright magenta, and I was able to dull it down just by using those three colors to bring down the intensity of that color so I could get what I needed. So I changed that intensity and dulled it down a little bit. Okay, so I won't linger too much on this. I just really think it's important that if you're going to be learning, that you really pay attention to that. Now I'm going to stop, and I'm going to look at a color. Okay, PR 122 is Opera Pink. This is from Peggy, Daniel Smith, and is Fugitive. Do you have any comments on fugitive colors? Oh boy, don't get me started. Here I go. I am going to show you paint pigment examples. All right. Every color that I use, and I will say this a million times, make sure that your color is permanent. If you look at this little example that you're going to see on my screen, the bottom row is all the different companies that sell quinacridone magenta, Pigment Red 122. And you can see how different they all look. At the very end, that is Opera. If you look at the bottom corner of that smallest, or of that last rectangle, you are going to see that Opera uses quinacridone magenta, PR 122, but it also uses a dye called rhodamine B. That dye is not permanent. And even though Opera, look at it, it's gorgeous, it's beautiful, it's bright, it looks like a flamingo, but that rhodamine B dye is going to leach out, it is going to disappear. And then what are you going to be left with? Your quinacridone magenta, which you could have just started with in the beginning. I could go on a very long rant about fugitive colors. And as a good example, I put alizarin crimson, PR 83, up at the top. True and real alizarin crimson is a natural organic pigment. And you can see from every one of those samples, no matter what company it's from, it will completely fade out of your painting. Please get rid of that color on your palette. Please throw it out. If we can just convince enough people to stop using those colors, then watercolor will get elevated to where oils and acrylics are. But until then, there are definitely colors that you want to stay away from. Opera, alizarin crimson, and I'm going to say Orlin, which is a natural yellow, is the same. But that's kind of for another tutorial, which I will definitely talk about again. So yes, I don't like fugitive colors. Peggy, so what brand are you using? Okay, let me switch back. to my image. My phthalo blue image, and you can see that I put a little tag on there, green shade, because phthalo blue also comes in a red shade. So this one is M Gram. M Gram is some of my favorite colors because they use honey as a humectant, and it stays nice and sticky on my palette for a long time. And they use beautiful bright pigments. So that is that is M Gram. For my yellow, I also use M Gram. So my Nickel Azo yellow, my PY150 is M Gram. The only exception to that is my quinacridone magenta. For some silly reason, M Gram does not make a single pigment quinacridone magenta. I don't know why. So I use either Winsor & Newton or Core, which is Golden, the Golden Company. They also make a very rich and beautiful PR122, and they're almost exact. I actually find the Core color to be a little bit more vibrant than Winsor & Newton's, but not enough in this painting that it will make a difference. So, okay, that question's answered. And hopefully everybody has their masking done, and I am looking at it, and it is very translucent, and it's all ready to go. Okay, I think I'm ready. Actually, I'm not ready. Let me stop for just a sec. I am going to get some clean water. Give me just a moment. Ultimately, I'm back. It would be wonderful if I had a little sink next to my table, but that's probably just asking too much. Okay, I'm going to get a couple extra paper towels here. Just keep them right next to me. So I just want to say, I get a little nervous sometimes too when I am first starting a painting. So I think what I'm going to do here, let me just soften up, or not soften, but let's just get rid of a little bit of those lines there. Pull my painting up here. Okay, let me stop here and answer Shannon since we haven't really got started yet. Shannon asks, by the way, there is Azo Yellow and Nickel Azo Yellow. They aren't interchangeable. Yes, you are absolutely right. Nickel Azo Yellow is PY150. And I almost never go by the name on a paint tube. Some companies, like M Gram, are really good about making sure that they use the chemical name on their tubes, but most names are a marketing name. So you have to be aware of that it may sound beautiful and pretty and wow, what a gorgeous color, you know, candy cane pink, I want to paint with that. But unless you know what those pigment numbers are, you're not going to know if it's permanent or not. So, okay, here we go. I am going to use a number 8. Let me make sure I'm facing downward. Oh, good, I am. Okay, so I'm going to use a number 8. And what I'm going to do first is I'm going to wet this area. Give me just a sec here so I can move things around on my screen. Okay. At first, I thought, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and just add in the teacup. But no, if you look at that teacup, especially on the side of it right there, it's a lot lighter than the shadow. I'm using a lot of water. Okay, let's talk about water. Do not be stingy with your water. Get it on there. Let it sink into the paper. If by the time you get over to another area and you see that that one is starting to get dull, like the paper is really absorbing it, add more water. What you want in the end is you want a nice even sheen. And if any of you were watching me last week, I think that was last week, when you were watching me paint my still life I'm working on right now, I take a lot of time and care, especially in that first layer of water. I want to have a nice sharp edge. So I paint to the inside. I don't try to do this because if you paint on that side, even with the water, you're going to get a ragged edge. Now, obviously, I'm painting so that you can see what I'm doing. So I'm going to try not to have to turn this painting. Normally, I would be turning this as I was putting the water on it, so I don't have to crick my wrist into a weird spot, but I really want you to be able to see everything that I'm doing. Okay, you can see, can you see how saturated that water is? So I'm gonna bend it in a little bit. Oh, look right there. First of all, I should have had my paper towels closer so I didn't drip. I tend to be messy when I paint. Okay, but can you see how much water is on that paper? There's a lot. And I can see right there is an area that I missed with water. So turning it to the side is really helpful. And you're gonna know when you have enough water down because your paper's going to, if you're using the 300-pound paper, it's going to buckle a little bit. And I know we didn't talk much about paper, but this isn't going to be the only live stream I'm going to do. Now I'm going to get a smaller brush. Now that I've figured out I can't use a preset for YouTube, I'm going to go ahead and change that for tomorrow too, just so everybody knows. I'll put a new link in there. And I'm just going to start the live stream. I'm going to start it first, then I'll send you the link. That way I don't have to worry about the stream not going through. Okay. So you can see how much care I took in getting that water down. My paper is very, very glossy. I'm very careful. I'm looking at my lines. I'm actually going to lift it up and I'm going to look at it sideways. You can I hope you can see, let's see. Can you see how the water's running right around there? So I don't want that. I want to be able to tilt it and see that all that water is sinking into the paper. I'm gonna say that a million times. Don't be stingy with your water. Get it on there. Keep adding it if you need to. Especially if you're a slow painter and you need to, get nice edges. And then let it sink in. So I'm gonna give that a couple of minutes. And I'll scoot this over. And if anybody has any questions while we're letting that sink in, it's probably going to take a minute or two, so. Wait, never mind. Don't anybody ask me any questions right now. Let's go ahead and mix that color. Okay. All right. So I'm going to completely forgot about the color, everyone. Okay. So we're mixing a shadowy color, a beautiful gray. And okay, I'm looking at that teacup and those shadows have a lot of warmth in it. I'm seeing a little bit more yellow. You may be seeing something different, but I'm definitely going to have it be a little bit more of a warmer gray. So I'm just going to play around here while we're waiting for that water to sink in. Okay, I also want to say this too about how long it takes water to sink in. So I'm in Arizona. Obviously, there's a wildfire just south of us right now. And it's very dry. It's very dry and windy. So that means my water might sink into my paper a little bit sooner than yours will. If you live in Florida, or wherever it is in the world you're living, there we go. Look at that. I'm getting it. Okay, now I'm happy. That is a beautiful gray. Okay, so anyhow, if you live in a really humid climate, it may take a little while for that to sink in. All right, a couple more things about this little area right here. If you're looking at your image, you're going to see that there seems to be some little highlights, reflections off of the cup onto the plate. I'm going to ignore those. Because if I really want to get those in later, it's going to be, to me, easier to just scrub them out very lightly with a scrubber brush. Okay, so I feel like I'm good. My water is not running anywhere. So I'm going to go ahead and start adding in some of this beautiful gray I mixed up. Now, if you look at this part of the teacup right there, it's a little bit less gray. So I kind of kept that shadow out of the way. And even along that whole edge, try to keep your paint away from there. Okay, this is a good thing to point out. How do you do that? You're probably thinking, well, wait a minute. It's water. The color is just going to head out towards those areas. Not if you allow that water to sink into the paper. Let it sink in. Don't have it running all over. If you see water kind of sitting on the top of the paper, as soon as that color hits it, it's just going to shoot right across your paper. See how? Okay, I'm going to go slow here. My brush is touching the paper, and I'm pulling a little bead of color around with me. The minute I lift up my brush, there you go. See how it dropped some of that color? So I'm just kind of skimming around. Staying away from that edge. Yes, that gray is going to start moving out there, but not too much. And you can already see, aha, look at that. It's kind of, you could tell it's kind of sinking in a little bit. Okay, now I've noticed in this area, there's really not too many shadows. So I'm going to try to stay away from that area as I'm dropping in these grays. And I'm going to repeat this again. If you do not have enough color or enough water on your paper, it's going to look splotchy and it's not going to have a nice soft blend as soon as it dries. Okay, I'm going up underneath the cup. And you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to add just a touch. You can see that I'm adding just a little bit of yellow. Why? Because that gray right there definitely has some more yellow reflections off of the lemons on the fabric. And so it's reflecting back that way, and I can see that. So I added just a little bit more yellow in there. Now I'm going to pick up a little bit more of the blue, just for some variety. I'm just very gently dropping in the color. And look at how awesome that is. You can kind of see that the color's basically staying, it's spreading out beautifully, but it's also staying pretty much where I put it. And I can even do the same here. I can go a little bit along this area and add in a little bit more of the blue. And I still have working time. My paper is still nice and glossy, although I can really see it's starting to sink in. So you want to watch that. If it starts getting a dull, stop. These are transparent staining colors. You can add another layer. And when you add that next layer, that first layer is going to stay right where you put it. Okay, now I can also see right along that edge, it's kind of dark. So right about there, I'm going to lift my brush. Okay, that's the first layer of our gray. So now what I want to do is I am going to stop and I'm going to use my hair dryer and I'm going to dry it. And while we're waiting for that to dry, I can answer some questions. Okay, so Shannon says, which yes, using a piece of paper with a hole punched out of it and looking at the color through that really actually helps to see the color. It sure does. One thing that doesn't help, while I'm letting this dry, let me mention this real quickly too. I'm going to go back to this my painting with 3 colors. So years ago, again, I can show you this, my palette. You may even have palettes like that. It's got 30 colors. I used to make these grids and then I would mix purples and oranges and greens out of all the colors I would have. And then I would have these lists and these, you know, naming all the colors I have and all the properties. It was such a waste of time. It really is. Don't bother with stuff like that. If you stick with, and I found a little area right there, gotta add in, sorry about that. If you just stick with these 3 colors and you make this color wheel and you mix your colors, you don't have to worry about all these charts and graphs and every little thing that you need to know about, you know, your 30 colors in your palette. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and dry this. Okay, let me stop here for a minute. Salaya Alanki is asking, how are you seeing more yellow in the shadow? Can you give a tip to train the eye to look for it? That is actually a wonderful question. So let's just let it dry a little bit more by itself. I love having my image on my computer screen. It's the true image. I don't have to worry about when I print it out what is going to happen with the printer, with printer inks. So then I can really, really, really enlarge that image. And now that that's a great question to ask. So I'm going to enlarge it a little bit more. And I'm going to go back to that screenshot of that so you can see it. Oops, let's pull this down. And we'll pull that down. Okay. So hopefully right in this area, look at it closely. If you have it on your computer screen, really, really enlarge it. You can see that, look what I did. I had that area wet and I forgot to drop the, the shadow in it. Okay, I'll do that in a minute. But if you look right here, you can see that this shadow area is a little bit more yellow. Look at this area right here. See how you can see that there's a little bit more of a blue in it? So we've got the yellow, we've got blue, and then if you come over here and you look, it's a little bit, goes back kind of a neutral, but you can see that there's a little bit of yellow. So that is just something that your eye will develop. You just have to keep looking at your painting over and over. And if you look right here, you can see that That almost is a little bit on the blue side, and then you can see a little bit more yellow traveling right up through there. Okay, so before I go on to drawing that, let me go back. And let's go back to here. And let me go ahead and fill that little area in. It was so funny. I was so careful about getting the water in there. And then I completely forgot about it. Oh well, it's just painting. We're not building a skyscraper. All right. I got some water in there. So now I'm going to take some of that color again. I'm not going to, that is such a tiny, tiny area. I'm not going to worry at all about how much it's sinking in. It's too small to worry about. The only thing I'm going to do is just add a little bit more of that blue. Okay. Again, normally I would turn this painting. Oops, now let me, bear with me a minute here. Okay, good. Got that. I actually can even see a little bit of blue right in there, but I'm not going to worry about that right now. We'll just let that dry. I'm going to go ahead and finish drying it with the blow dryer. Okay, something about drawing an image I want to give you a little tip on. When you are making sure that an area that you've just put a layer of paint on and you are going to be building layers, it is an absolute must that you have this absolutely and 100% sure that it is completely dry. If you do not, believe it or not, as you go, you'll feel and you'll say, oh, okay, well, it seems like it's dry, but the paper still feels a little cool. That means there's still moisture in there. So when you try to go and make, like, say, a nice edge against something, you are going to get these tiny microscopic feathers off that new area that you've painted. And that means that it was not dry enough. And I can feel, now that I've let the heat dissipate, that it's still cool. So I have to dry it a little bit more. Okay, let that heat dissipate, and it feels pretty dry. And as long as your board is flat too, or your paper. Now, I normally, when I'm painting, I'll usually have this mounted to my board and the edges taped off, but it's just, I didn't want it scraping along my table. It's just a little bit easier to pick up and move if I need to without it being mounted to my board. Okay, let's see. So that feels pretty dry. So maybe not. Okay, sorry, give me another minute here. Okay, now that I'm looking at it, here's a good example, and I'm going to pull this back over because I think this is really important. We were talking about value. You see how the edge of this teacup now, you're thinking, well, I don't know, that's pretty bright on there. The reason why it's not looking super, super white like you can see in those reflections and highlights is because I have not finished darkening up all of the shadows. So we need to go a little bit darker in those shadows. Okay, so we're going to do that once more. I'm going to go ahead and I'm wetting it again. Every successive time that you wet your paper, it's going to sink in quicker. And one of the reasons why is because you've gotten rid of some of the sizing on the paper. And sizing is just something that the paint companies do. I use Arches. Hopefully you saw that. Arches 300-pound cold pressed paper. And they add a sizing in it, and that's just to help you keep your paper or your paint on the surface of your paper. But I actually want it to sink in. So it just takes a little bit on the first layer of water to get everything to sink in nice. Now, one thing, and you know, it's always good to be willing to change how you're painting something. Now you notice as I was putting the water on, everything stayed exactly where I put it. I didn't have to worry about any of that color lifting. It stayed right where I put it. So that being said, I'm going to do one more layer of the shadow, and then I'm going to stop, and I'm going to tell you why. I want to get those flowers in there and see how that's going to affect the value. And then if I need to, once those flowers are in, then we can add a little bit more shadows. If you were working with opaque colors, you would not be able to do that. But I'm going to be able to, because I'm not going to worry about them lifting. Okay, I think my water's already sinking in nicely. Okay, so now let's go back here to our colors. Let's get some more of that gray mixed up. Okay. Truthfully, if I were working on this on my own, it would probably take me a lot more hours than I'm going to be showing on this, I would be, again, layer after layer. I would put those flowers in. I would be spending a lot of time just really, really getting in all the beautiful fluctuations that you're seeing in that shadow. Again, I'm staying away from that edge. If you need to, sometimes it's helpful if you feel like the color spreads too much, take your brush, touch it to your paper towels, and just get that little paint bubble off the tip. Oh, you can see how that really dried. So now I'm just going to take a damp brush, go back in there and cover the whole thing again and let that yellow kind of spread and blend out with that blue, because I see a little bit of a shadow up at the top that's more yellow and it's more blue in that area. Okay, so I'm good with that. So here's what I'm going to do. No. Back up a minute. You can see another area where it needs some shadow. I just want to try to get in as much as I can in this layer. And right there, I just picked up a little bit of yellow. I'm just kind of going around into all these areas. Another thing that you don't want is you don't want to mix your gray so perfectly that it's this even color. That's how you can kind of get realism into your paintings, and is by really letting some variations in that paint show through. Now, one thing I can see is my color has bled over more than I wanted into the very edge of the cup. That's okay, because I probably am going to need to do some scrubbing when we're all done with that area. I'm going to dry it once more, and then we're going to go ahead and we're going to let that dry, and then we're going to, I was thinking, so you're also hearing my, I'm just streaming. Let's get in the shadows in the rest of the cup before we go any farther. So let's get that dry. And so while I'm letting that dry, if you guys have some questions, I can, while I'm just aiming this down, we can answer some questions. Now's the time. Okay, Corn says, what do I do if I have a hard edge? Don't worry about that right now. I have a trick that we're going to do to soften that up later. If you have a hard edge, that might be because you didn't let that water sink down into the paper enough, or you originally didn't have enough water and it didn't, again, sink down deep enough. So that will help stop those weird little lines that you get along the edge of your painted area. Okay, so I've got it dry, and this is, so give me a sec here to think how to explain this. Okay, so you can see where I was talking about in this area needing it to be, because there's not a whole lot of shadows, and obviously the shadows aren't even everywhere. And so even for me, even with my experience, I can look at this and think, ooh, I don't exactly know how much darker I really want to get that. So what I want to do is draw in those little shapes, and then that's going to tell us how much darker that value is going to be in there. So while we're waiting on all that, let's go ahead and get that teacup started. I'm going to go ahead and work in this little area right in here where we did the masking. And I'm going to go with an even bigger brush. This is my Dragon's Tongue brush from Cheap Joe's. They're a little bit more pricey. I bought these about 15 years ago, and look at how beautiful they still are. So it was pretty pricey. I think this one was about $70, but it's also natural hair. So I know it's going to last me a lifetime if I take care of it. Normally, I stick with painting with these silver white brushes, very cheap, very inexpensive, lovely bounce, and they keep a nice tip for a while. But they're cheap enough that as soon as the tip starts getting a little bit fuzzy, I can save those for either masking fluid or when I'm teaching workshops and people would like to try out a brush. So, but for now, on this big area, I'm going to cover it with this Dragon's Tongue. Now, I kind of went over down into there, but I'm not going to worry about that. I'm just going to try to stay away from that area. And I've already... Do as I say, don't do as I do. Not what your parents used to say to you. Okay. Let's see. So I'm just painting right over... Oh, what the heck. I'm going to go ahead and come down on into here. And it feels pretty dry. Okay, let's give that a minute to sink in. And while that's sinking in, let's go ahead and get some more gray in there. Another reason painting with 3 colors is so nice is that you don't have to remember to think about what colors you used to make your grays. You know it's the 3 colors that are sitting right in front of you. Now, as I'm looking at those grays, you can see that along the side edge of the teacup here, there's a lot of yellow. But as we get out here, we get a lot lighter with the shadow, and there's actually some pretty neutral grays in there. So I'm just trying to make sure I've got a few different areas here of shadow color, and I want it really light. And I'm looking at the color, or at the water. Oh, and I see a place I missed, which accidentally had some color on my brush. Okay, that's all right. Okay, here I go. Now, you're probably wondering, well, wait, she's going into the brown. That's okay. That is going to be so dark by the time we go and put that color in that this is fine. Okay. It's actually a lot of yellow in that shadow right there. Okay, I've got adding a little bit more blue. So now I'm going to come over in this area. Okay. Now it's some shadow. And again, if you're looking at that teacup right in that area, you can see that there's a lot of yellow in there. So I'm going to pull a little bit more yellow there. And at the very end, then we're going to do some wet on dry so we can build up some of those darker shadow values. Okay. I think that's looking pretty good. The only thing I neglected was that handle. Let's go ahead and address that right now. Don't worry about that little spot right there because it's actually not a pure white. It definitely has got some blue in it. And as you can see, I did not add water first, but it's such a small area. But there's also a lot of yellow in that handle. Actually, that's going to be a lot of fun because one of my favorite parts about shadows is when you get towards the very end and you do the wet on dry. And you can see I'm kind of keeping it away from that spot. Now I'm going to go to a smaller brush. I'm going to go back to that one I originally used. Just picking up some of that yellow. Okay. Let's see, a little bit right under here, under this area right here. All right, I think that's good. I'm going to go ahead and dry it. And now that I've got the basic first few layers of shadows, I'm going to get this all dry and then we'll start on the flowers. Okay, let me kind of bend my paper a little bit. Okay, there we go. All right, now for the fun part. All those little flowers, that's actually going to be a lot of fun. Okay, I'm going to get a small brush here. This is a number 2. I'm going to clean out that center. Let me just make sure you can, okay, good. Just wanted to make sure you can still see my palette. All right. I'm going to use a bigger brush just to mix up this red. So I want to have plenty of it. Okay, so again, I'm just adding some yellow to that magenta just to get a little bit more of an orangey red. Now I'm going to add a little bit of that blue. Let's try some more. Okay, I'm getting closer. Just trial and error. And I'm going to take my... Oh, perfect. Actually, I'm going to use my 2 or something small. I think I'm going to use my 0. I'm going to use my 0. And let's see. Let's start with this bigger one. So all I'm kind of doing is kind of outlining it a little bit. No. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to wet all that. Especially this bigger one here. I'm going to put a little tint of that color down. Because I don't want those lines to be too sharp. There we go. I'm going to give that a second. So obviously you can see I'm a little bit puzzled about how I'm going to do this, but that's okay, because you're going to get to go through my thinking process on this. So I think what I want to do is I'm going to let that sink in a little bit. And I think I'm going to have to tape my board down. So I'm giving that a second to dry. Or I'm sorry, tape my paper down. There we go. Let's see. That's a little bit better. And now as I'm looking at it, there's a lot more yellow in there than you think there is. Oh, too much yellow. I'll lift that off. There we go. That's a little bit better. What I'm doing is I'm letting that water sink in. I'm trying to make sure my paint is not as watery. And then I'm just letting it kind of feather out a little bit around those edges. And then once these big flowers are done, there's only 2 of them. Then the other ones are going to be a little bit easier because they're just like little outlines. I'm going to let it dry just even a little bit more. Okay, so while that's drying, I'm going to go around and just start filling in all these little tiny try to vary your the width of your lines, and also make sure that you don't have it, again, just like the shadows, make sure that you're varying the value of those lines. That's what I wanted to say. And then what's really going to make these stand out is that we're going to add some of the color in there, some of those blue flowers. That's going to look pretty. Ooh. Oh you know what? Look at that. I did not draw in this cute little flower right there. So now I'm going to have to do it by hand. Here we go. Hopefully you guys got it in. Hopefully you can see that I added in a little bit of blue, change that up a little bit, and then over here in this area I have just a little bit more yellow. I'm going to have to fix that problem right there in the middle, but that's okay. That's actually a good thing. You can see how I problem solve in my paintings. You know, there's an interesting saying, you never see an artist's failures. It's not like you'll go to an art show and they'll be hanging their worst paintings. But I don't always get everything right off the bat. You're always going to have problems that develop along the way, and that's okay. See how now as I add a little bit of those darker areas, it's really starting to come through. So once this big flower, once we get that all filled in, then we'll do that one. And then again, it's just outlining all the rest of these little flowers. Now, as I am looking at this, I think I'm going to need a little bit more yellow in that shadow. But again, that's okay. I'm not worried about that right now. When I go to do another shadow layer, I'm going to warm up that shadow in there with a lot more yellow. And then I think what I'll do is we'll stop and take just a little tiny break, maybe talk about any issues you may be having. And then that'll let everybody else catch up too. Yep, another little area forgot some leaves. Isn't that amazing when you start seeing how it's really coming together? At this point, again, I can now see that I'm going to have to adjust my shadows a little bit, add a little bit more yellow, but all in all, I like how it's turning out. It's like we're building the foundation. And then what's really going to make this saucer pop out, and the teacup is when we add in some of that bright green and those blues in the little flower. That's going to be the fun part. Actually, this is all fun. Again, if I was not filming this, I would be turning this in the direction that my hand naturally pulls to make really nice, even lines. And I would definitely be a lot more careful with how these lines look. Those leaves are going to look so beautiful when we just drop in some green. They're going to be, darn it. I'm really happy though with how that red turned out. Oh, and look at that. I didn't put in the little veins. That's okay. Okay. And here I am going on about paying attention to things. That's okay, I got it. Hopefully you guys all got that in there. There we go. All fixed. So again, I think I had a little bit of stumble right in there, but I'm going to fix that. Once we start getting in those darker values, then you're really going to start seeing how those flowers just pop off that saucer. Okay, I've just got a few to finish over here. Okay, I'm going to give a few seconds just to let that area dry. And let's see if we have any questions. I'm going to just rest my hand for a sec. Nancy Q, would you first outline a natural flower in a painting, or is this just for the painted teacup? Oh, very good question. Yes, just for this painted teacup. Really, I don't outline anything when with my realism and my flowers, but it's kind of funny because we're actually painting a painting. So that's okay. That's the way that that China pattern was painted. So we're just kind of trying to imitate it, and then I'll fill in. Then we'll fill in the little areas in the blue, and then we'll really see it jump out and really stand out. Especially when we get going over those areas and we highlight and then we pull out some highlights right in that area with some scrubber brushes. So I think it's going to look really good. So good question. A couple little more right in here. So, yeah, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to lift this up a little bit and I'm going to turn it. Let me check, make sure you can see it. Okay. There we go. It will just be easier for me to get these little leaf areas if it's at an angle. So I also might want to add something that happens to me in my first initial washes. I kind of get a little bit of a panic going on. Start thinking, oh no, is this looking weird? Does this look awful? What am I doing? And if you're feeling that way, that's okay. This is only the first layers. And again, I've said that if I were doing this on my own, I definitely most likely wouldn't be this far along. I would be very carefully figuring out if it would be better for me to make these lines while the paper's a little bit damp. But again, there's only so much time we've got. And so I think it's going to look great. It really will. We're going to get that yellow in the shadows. And again, remember what I was talking about too with value. So we just have to build a little bit more value in here to really make it pop. But I think already it's really starting to come alive. I'm pretty happy with it. So really, if you're at a point in your painting where you feel like you're struggling, stop, get up, walk around, look away, come back to it. Sometimes you'll see things in a different light. And I even have to admit, sometimes it's very hard for me when you're watching, because sometimes I feel like, oh my gosh, I can't make a mistake. What is everybody going to think? What if I have to redo the way I'm doing something? People are going to think I don't know what I'm doing? Well, every painting is a learning experience, honestly. I don't always know what I'm doing. Sometimes I have to experiment and kind of play around with things. But that's also a great way to learn. You're always teaching yourself something. So that's important. So by the time we come back tomorrow, you're going to see a lot of places I've made mistakes and I've had to fix. There we go. I'm almost done with these little leaves. Ooh, and see right at this leaf I'm working on right there, you can see that there's actually some green in there. almost like they're just little whimsical paisley teardrops. What's kind of interesting is as I'm looking at these shapes, you can see that the color that they've added, they've not kept it within the lines. They've just kind of just almost a watercolory effect of just very gently putting some of that color in. So that's going to look really good when we do that. Finish this little guy over here. Okay, I'm going to flip it back around. Oh wow, check that out. That's going to look really neat when we finish that. Once we get some color and some life into it. All right, now let's go ahead and finish up this big one, or maybe I should give everybody does anybody have any questions they'd like to ask? I'm not seeing any, so how about I go ahead and work on this flower. There's only a couple of little spots in there, so then we'll be done with that. Okay, there we go. Taking my little spray bottle. My colors are getting a little dry. I'm glad actually that I started on this flower first. And even then, that's not quite done. We'll fill it in with some detail, but I'm feeling a little bit more confident in what I'm painting. So hopefully you're seeing that these little lines, they really weren't as scary as even I thought. As long as you've got a nice small brush you'll get it. And just take your time. I will say this while I'm finishing up these little spots is this is I'm actually really enjoying painting like this. I actually like this a lot more than filming tutorials. Filming tutorials is very difficult. You have to think about the time, breaking things down into chapters. It's just, and then editing, which takes forever. But I feel a lot more relaxed painting this way, to be honest. I hope you guys are enjoying it. I really do. I did a really bad job drawing that little flower out. Usually I'm much more careful than that. Oh, how fun. Okay, and then we got another little shape right there that I forgot to put in. It's coming together though. I'm not going to worry about exact detail over those areas because it's really hidden. So I'm just going to kind of suggest those little areas. And then we'll see how they look. Okay. Wow. I think that's looking very interesting. Excuse me. I'm liking this a lot. So I want to let this dry a little bit. And I want to go ahead and get that dark value in there. Let's work on that next. So let's take a few seconds. Okay. So I'll answer question. Nancy wants to know where you can find that image here. I've still got the link pasted. There we go. Okay, so this is for Cynthia. So Cynthia, I just posted that link again where you can find that drawing. And again, for anybody that had to had to find my stream this time, this is all going to be it will all be up once the live stream is over tonight, or I'm here in a little bit, and then you'll be able to just watch it at your leisure and catch up. So before I start mixing the color for there, let me just talk about these flowers a little bit. I'm not going to use the word panic, but when I first did these petals right here, I was like, uh-oh, I don't know about this. Maybe I'm going about this wrong. So look, I guess what I want to say is I don't know everything. And sometimes it's just a process of working through things, but I collected myself, I kind of took some of the color and I painted it in the center. And so now I can see that it's all going to come together. I really just needed to get the rest of those shapes in and just relaxed a little bit and realized that it's going to all come together. It really is going to look good. And we really have just got these first layers on. And so I realized I missed a little area right up in here. So I'm going to get these little guys right there. And, one of the reasons why I'm telling you about my goofs and being a little bit nervous is, it can make you nervous. I mean, you're all watching me, and so sometimes you just get this idea that in your head that you have to be perfect because everybody's watching you, and what if you made a mistake? But you know what? I'm gonna make mistakes. It's gonna happen, and at least if you see me making them, maybe that will help you relax a little bit and know that you don't have to be perfect either. It's just a painting. I wish I could show you all the paintings I have thrown away when I was first learning to paint. There were a lot of them. Okay, got that. We'll still have to do a little detail, but I'm going to worry about that later. I want to get that very, very dark value in there. I think that's really important, and that's going to... I think if I get this area in here, one of the darkest parts of the painting, along with these little black areas, it's going to really help us see where the values are sitting in this part of the teacup. So let's go ahead and do that. And I think, let me get a little bit more yellow on there. I do not want to run out of that color. So I'm going to make sure I got plenty of fresh color on there so I can really build that deep value. I think I have plenty of blue. Okay, here we go. So just like I did in that color wheel example, I'm just adding a lot of the red. Hopefully you saw just how much yellow. I actually picked up quite a scoop of yellow. then the phthalo blue. Okay. I'm going to go back to wetting this area. And this time I'm just going to stay right within that T area. And remember, I'm not having to worry about my bubble, my little bubbles right there. So I just want to get in the T. And again, if you didn't mask anything out, absolutely don't worry about it. I have a fun trick at the end that I'm going to share with you on how you can pull those highlights out. Okay, that's pretty wet. So let's give that a chance to sink in. And let's see if there's any more questions. Shannon, so I'm a perfectionist, and note to self, don't leave your lines too tight. Ugh. But I'm going to just stay a little more impressionistic than chill, not my natural mode. Yeah, you know, it's so funny about painting, and that's why I have never understood any artists that don't want to give out all their tips and techniques, especially if you're paying for a big workshop. You know, none of us are going to paint alike. I am absolutely would be thrilled for people to just take what I'm teaching you and come up with a spectacular painting. In no way, shape, or form do I ever feel threatened about that. It's art. You know, this is supposed to be a happy part of our life. And I absolutely love it when I see people that come up with beautiful paintings. And I'm not going to say painting with 3 colors is my technique. A lot of artists do that. But I just love seeing people that have gone from major problems with painting to really having it all just kind of come together. Okay, so you know what? Let me grab a little bit more of that yellow. There we go. Okay, so my color's sunk in. I'm gonna, ooh, not all that much. Did you see what happened? That's exactly what I was talking about. Did you see how that color shot across? It went right out of that area. And you can see it was mostly the yellow. So, my bad. I gotta let it sink in a little bit more. I'm actually glad that you saw that, though. And that's what happens when you don't let your color or your water really, really sink down. So let's let that sink for a second. That'll give me a chance to look back on here. Now, I'm really, really hoping that you can see this part. It's not light enough yet, but it will be, especially when we use the scrubber brush and we get some more color in here. But right now you can even see how it's building form, how you can see the edge kind of come in a little bit, and this is being highlighted. So this is going to look really nice when we're finished. And I actually even noticed in there I forgot to put in a couple of the lines. So I still have an area left over here. I'm going to grab it. And while I'm waiting for that to dry, I'm going to draw those little areas in. Or paint. I should say I'm going to paint those little areas in. There we go. go. Okay, I think that's better. All right, let's go ahead and, there we go. Now it's spreading out, but it's a little bit more controlled. And I'm going to pick up red. If you look right here in this area of the shadow, it's very red. And in this part of the shadow is very yellow. And again, I'm not worrying about that highlight because I'm going to get that in later. Okay, switch to a bigger brush. There we go. Well, I overdid it with my blue there, but that's okay. Just add some more yellow and some more red. Okay. You notice how my thicker paint isn't really moving around a lot? So now it's really thick. Look at that. Okay, now I'm going to pick up a small brush. So I'm staying to the inside of that line and making sure that I have a nice clean edge. Now, when I go over this again, I'm not going to wet the whole thing. I'm going to wet the areas where there are sharp delineations in the shadow. But for now, I'm good with that. I'm going to kind of pick it up. And let it roll around, let those colors mingle. Isn't it interesting how bright the rest of the cup looks now that we've got that really dark value in there? And obviously that's going to lighten up a little bit. Because we've still got to get it even darker. And then once we put those really dark values back in and underneath the lace, it's gonna look beautiful. And so while I'm letting that dry, let's talk a little bit about this lace. It looks complicated, but it's actually not. What's going to be fun about the lace is we're going to paint behind the lace. Some people call that negative painting, and it doesn't matter what you call it. We're going to be avoiding the lace on the top. We're just going to go in and paint shadows behind it. And I am thinking about how I'm going to accomplish that. I may wet the whole lace area first and then just very gently drop in, just mingle some colors in there to kind of approximate some shadow areas, and then leave it alone, let it dry, and then we'll go ahead and work on filling in all the colors and the shadows behind it. And that's really going to make that lace stand out. It's going to be really pretty. So yeah, I think that's how I'm going to do the lace. So right now, let's let that dry. And I want to see if anybody else has any questions. Feel free to ask, or we can actually just take a little break for a minute. I'll keep watching the questions, and I'm going to go ahead and very lightly get this area dried. pretty dry. So what I'm gonna do now, what am I gonna do now? Okay, let me clean off a little bit of this area next to my yellow. I'm going to take some yellow. You can probably see that I'm just letting it go over into that area. I just want to get this to be a little bit on the warmer side. And then later on, we'll even soften up those edges. And again, we're going to do all that with a scrubber brush. Blow dry that again. Okay. Grabbing a number 6 brush, I'm going to come over here in this magenta area, picking up a little bit of that dark brown value. I'm staying right along that edge. There's a nice sharp edge. Of that shadow. I'm just letting it kind of come over into this area. Just picked up some yellow, dropped that in there for a little bit of variety. Now I'm going to let that dry again, and this time I'm going to have a nice sharp line going from right here all the way down. Get that third dark shadow in there. actually, instead of taking the time to get that dry, let's address this area up here. Let's get that shadow to continue up in that area and very quickly get that put in. I'm going to stop for just a sec and grab some clean water. Okay, I have some clean water. My palette's getting getting a little dirty, but I think I can use this area over here and grab some of that blue. Because remember, it's still just the 3 colors, so just going to kind of make my gray over here. It's got that yellow in it again. And staying right along that line. Isn't that interesting? If you remember, we kind of went over this whole area with a little bit of shadow. And now that I've darkened this area, it almost doesn't even look like we put any shadow in there. Let's go back to a small brush. Okay, now I think we can go ahead, come back over here. Let me get this. No, I don't want to waste time with that. It can dry by itself. Why we go ahead and add a little bit more color over into this area. And again, I'm just wet on dry. Did you see how I wet my brush and I took that color, stopped, wet it again, and just let it blend right out? Now, even though that area is a little bit wet, I'm going to let these colors kind of run in there. Okay, just adding a little bit of blue. Okay, now I can stop and let's let this dry completely, and then we'll get those edges. We'll get those edges nice and sharp. Ah, misplaced a brush. Okay, wait, there we go. All right. Got a nice sharp line there. Switch to a bigger brush. Sometimes I look at things when I'm painting and I think I see one color, but then I look again, it's like, no, I thought that there was a lot more blue in there, but there's actually a lot more red in there. Now I just put a lot of water in that area. I'm going to go back to a really big brush. Again, this is just wet on dry. I'm being very gentle. At this point, you're putting so much color on the paper that it's almost starting to sit on the surface. So you have to use a gentle touch. Again, lots of water, and then the color. I am going to pick it up again. This time turn it. I want a nice even edge, and I don't think I achieved that. There we go. Lovely. Okay. I can see a little bit of the variation in the color from below. Might be a little bit harder for you to see because the water is obviously reflecting off the lights. And now I need another piece of tape. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and leave that for now. We'll let it dry and let's see, does anybody have any questions? If you do, go ahead and post them and I'll go ahead and get the rest of this dry. Okay, while we let the rest of this brown in here dry, I am going to clean off a small area of that palette. And I'm going to quickly get some more clean water, and then we're going to drop in a little bit of that green and blue. Okay, here we go. Got some nice clean water. Pick up some of that yellow. Let it get a little bit contaminated. I'll actually let it get a lot contaminated. So I'm going to put down some clean yellow because I want those leaves to be nice. Get that beautiful bright color. And I do realize that it's after 2, and but we got started a little late with that problem with the live stream, so I want to at least get this in before we go on to continue this tomorrow. Oh, look at that. Beautiful. Gorgeous, gorgeous green. Okay, so what I'm going to do, little bit bigger brush. Just going to try one. So I put some water down. It's such a small area that it's okay. I'm just not going to wait too long. So I really want you to see this before anybody has to go for the day. Here we go. It's going to dry a little bit lighter. I went outside the lines a little bit, but I noticed that it's that way. Wow, look at how that really brightens it up. Ah, love it. I had it a little bit too blue, so I added some yellow. And same for up in here. This is such a small area, I'm not even adding water. How fun is that? That looks, I love how that looks. Okay. And then we've got a little spot of green over here. Trying to make it look very painterly. I'm just brightening up that color a little bit because I know it's gonna fade a little bit as soon as it dries. Oh gosh, that is so cute. That looks really good. Okay, let's go ahead and do some of the blue. Now that's obviously too bright of a blue. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a little bit of the magenta to it. And I think that's perfect. And yeah, I haven't added all of the little, all those little hatch marks. That's okay, I'm going to add those in later. You see how I'm just kind of skipping around. I'm not getting it in there absolutely perfect, and I'm kind of outside of the lines in some areas because that's honestly how it's kind of painted. I love how that looks. And now I'm really starting to see the value. If you were really looking before I had that brown in, this was actually looking a little dark, and I think that's what had me a little nervous about it. I thought maybe I had gone too dark, but no, I don't think so at all. I think it's going to be fine. Now I'm going to warm it up a little bit with some of the yellow. And I can see some other areas where I needed some green. And obviously I'll do a little bit of work on the red and finishing up the red. But I think it looks, I'm pretty happy with it so far. It's looking really good. Let's see. Oh gosh, I'm sorry, I forgot. How did you pronounce cornlerm? You set it up there. Oh, cornet. Cornet. Let's see. I'm so behind. Okay, so I'll stop for a minute. I'm not sure what the bagel Regarding the bagel, I have one too, but take a monochrome photo with your phone. Oh, so you might be talking to somebody else. Okay. Oh, okay. I overshadowed my saucer next to my cup, and now I see that it looks a bit like a bagel. Any way to fix it? You know what? Don't stress about that. I have, and I'm going to show you these right now because we are going to use these a lot towards the end tomorrow. These are all my scrubber brushes, and you have really, really fine edges, and we are going to go in certain areas and just pull out some color. And it would help too if you want to go over to, we can either wait till tomorrow or you can do it now. You can post a picture of your painting in the discuss area of where I have all the information for the painting, and then we can look at it and see how to help you. There's usually a lot of ways you can fix a painting, so I would not stress. And yeah, Shannon makes a good point. It might be the fact that you have not got in those dark values. Again, if I cover that up again, to me, this whole area was looking real dark until I added in the darkest of those values. And don't forget, we're still gonna do the cloth tomorrow, and that's going to be a very painterly effect, so it's going to go relatively quick, and we're going to get those stripes in, and so don't worry about it. And you also, if you're really stressed about it, you can redo it, although I mean, I don't think that you would really have to, but this will post later on, and then we can go ahead and again, if you want to do that in the evening, and then you'll be able to catch up with us tomorrow. Okay, Shannon, I just took my monochrome shot of my bagels pretty close in value. It will look much better with the tea. Yes, absolutely. Again, that's what I was just saying. Look at how that dark value of that tea just completely changed how you see this cup and saucer. Just like I was explaining how whites look very white when they're next to a lot of dark. So don't stress. Again, we've got those very, very, very dark blacks. And so that's going to make a huge difference. So I would not stress over that. And you can always do this again. Honestly, I want to tell you that I have really, there's been a couple of my paintings, and some of them I think they're some of my better paintings. I've redone them 2 or 3 times. Sometimes it just takes a while to get used to how your paints interact, but I wouldn't stress over it. Okay, so would anybody like to see me continue, or would you like me to stop? You know, sometimes 3 hours is a long time to go without getting a break. Again, once I stop the stream, this will, it's going to upload so that you can view it, you know, at your leisure. So whatever is comfortable with you guys. Okay, and Shannon, you're saying you're behind also. Okay. So I think maybe this probably would be a good time to stop, and I'll wait. I'll give this another 30 seconds. A lot of people don't realize that when you're doing a live stream, there's about a 20-second delay. So I just don't want to close this out without anybody getting any more questions in, or in real time. In fact, let me switch back to the front here for a minute. So yeah, so I just want to say that in real time, we can go back to my Thinkific website, and we can carry on a discussion there. Okay, so whew, okay, that's good, because I kind of need a break too. It's pretty intense to keep painting like this. So I guess I just want to make sure you guys have all the information you need, because I really want to. I really want to see you guys succeed with this, and I really want to see what you're painting. Okay, so this is wonderful. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to stop the stream, And then let's head over to my Thinkific site and we'll take a look there. And if you guys, again, if you want to post it, it's much easier for me to critique if I can see it. All right, so I'm going to go ahead. Nancy, let's see, you said, learned so much already. Colors and details and patience. Yes. And hopefully, if you're looking at it again, you're really seeing how it's all starting to come together. And that was all just really, honestly, about 2 hours of painting, even though for me, that's pretty intense to keep going like that without little breaks. But I promise you, by the time we get to this tomorrow, it's gonna look great. The background's gonna be pretty simple. Again, it's gonna be that painterly effect because really we're painting a painting. So, okay, Shannon, you want me to post that link? And here it is. And that's where we can all go. And then I will go ahead and head over there now and I'll open up the discussion. And we'll see. Love to hear what everybody's thinking. And yeah, let's go from there. Okay, so we'll see you over in the discuss. Okay, thanks everybody.